Hey guys, it's Lindsay with When Nerds Attack, and I'm here with a new video series called Dreadfully Yours, and it is going to be my video reviews of Penny Dreadful. So basically what we're going to do is, instead of doing weekly reviews of Penny Dreadful, sorry, my cat is going crazy. Instead of doing weekly reviews on the website of Penny Dreadful, I'm going to do video reviews that are kind of going to not only recap the episodes, but also going to delve into the episodes themselves, talk about the lore of the show, kind of the history of what's going on in London at the time, and also going to talk about the books that they are based on and how it kind of all fits in together. I have a literature degree, and I specialized in British literature, so this stuff is near and dear to my heart. This is my favorite TV show, so this is something that I wanted to do for a really, really long time, and I'm just now getting around to it. I apologize that this video is late. I know that the episode has been out for a while, but I have been really busy with other interviews, as you guys have seen on the website, so just bear with me. I know that this episode is late, but the other episodes should be up on the website more quickly than this. I am shooting in a different location. I'm trying some different stuff, so hopefully this looks a little bit better. If it doesn't, I'll try to go into a different area. I'm trying some different stuff, so bear with me. I'm not a video person. And if you see me glancing down, I am looking at my notes because this is heavily intensive. So because it looks like we are going to be sticking in areas for a while, because Ethan is in New Mexico and it looks like Sir Malcolm is going to be in New Mexico, I'm going to stick to geographic locations for as long as possible because it will make things easier bouncing around. If it looks like we are going to really have a lot of characters in one area, I will separate things by character instead. But for now, we are going to separate by geographic locations, and I'm going to start out with Vanessa. Okay, so we see Vanessa, and Vanessa is obviously a mess. Ethan leaving her has destroyed her, as it isn't that much of a surprise. Vanessa put everything out there with Ethan, and Ethan left her at probably her lowest. She thought everything was going pretty well for her, and she thought she'd found someone who truly understood her, and Ethan ditched her, which is just perfect. I love Ethan a great deal, but Ethan is a bit of an idiot. I like how Vanessa is literally people literally want her to be the bride of the devil, but no, being a werewolf is way more of an issue than being the bride of the devil, and he's the one who is just doomed for all eternity. He's a special kind of stupid. I love him, but he's a special kind of stupid. So obviously, she's been dealing with depression. It looks like she has a little bit of agoraphobia. She doesn't want to go outside, doesn't want to be seen by anybody. And bless my favorite one of my favorite characters, Sir Lyle, really goes in there, pulls her up by her bootstraps, tells her she needs to get out, and tells her to go to a psychologist. We also find out that Sir Tennyson has died. Sir Tennyson died in early October of 1892. He died in October 2nd? I think October 9th, if I remember correctly. Tennyson was highly, highly regarded in London at the time. He was beloved of Queen Victoria. His poetry brought her great comfort when her husband died, and we all know that she did not take her husband's death well. So this was really, really important to her. So the entire city is in mourning. Vanessa is in mourning. It sets a great tone for what's going on. Sorry, this is early in the morning when I'm shooting this. So we also know that we are going with he also wrote the line, "It is better to have loved than lost than never loved before," which is a really good theme with Vanessa right now. I think we're going with that. And I also really love that line that she needs to come back to the mammals. And we know that her symbol is the scorpion and spiders. So it's really interesting that they're saying come back to the mammals, come back to the living, come back to something that's less arachnid. So she ends up going to see Dr. Seward. So interestingly enough, this is the indication, way before we get to the end of the episode, that we are fully going into the Dracula storyline of this season. So Dr. Seward is in Dracula. Dr. Seward is a man in Dracula. Dr. Seward is in love with Lucy. So Lucy is one of the main characters in Dracula, and Dracula is in love with Lucy. I am not quite sure if... I assume that Vanessa is a stand-in for Lucy in some ways, because Dracula is desperately trying to get Lucy in the book in a lot of ways. Lucy has a lot of suitors, like Vanessa does. But the parallels don't really match up. I wouldn't say that there's a direct parallel there. But suffice to say that Seward is one of Lucy's suitors. Seward is also a psychologist. And Reinfeld, who is Seward's secretary, comes into play later on. And I will talk about him when we actually get to the end of the episode. But Dr. Seward, we also find out, has the last name Clayton. And also we know that Joan Clayton was the Cutwife and was Vanessa's mentor. And this Dr. Seward is a direct descendant of Joan Clayton. It was heartbreaking to me to see Vanessa reaching out for this woman. Obviously, it's not a reincarnation, but it is someone who is a direct descendant of the woman who basically helped Vanessa be who she was meant to be. Helped her find the strength within her to become the person that she is now, and whose death utterly devastated her, and helped her realize how she needed to react to things. That episode killed me when Joan Clayton died. It's going to be really interesting to see how she reacts to this. I think knowing that she's a Clayton is going to help her deal with things better. But again, watching her reach out to Clayton, to Dr. Seward, was devastating. Vanessa is looking for any kind of contact at this point, anything that reminds her of what she's lost, and what Dr. Seward said to her about how she reaches out for impossible men, how she wants to be seen and not be seen, and how she kind of shrouds herself in things, was dead on, and obviously kind of validated everything that I've always thought about Vanessa, my cat. And it's heartbreaking, I think, for Vanessa to hear that, but I think it also helps validate her and helps her understand herself and helps her know how to move forward. And hopefully it will help her move forward. And it broke my heart. Vanessa's in a horrible place right now, and she's been through so much, and I just want her to be happy. And it's going to be really difficult for her to be happy for a while. One of the things about this show is that the show is going to make you earn your happy ending, and there are going to be no happy endings for a while. So again, I will talk about Reinfeld later on in the episode, but it is very important to note that Reinfeld, the secretary, is in Dracula. So we also see that Vanessa is being stalked by vampires. Again, a sign that Dracula is around. But she goes to the Natural History Museum. So, the Natural History Museum is interesting within itself. So, the Natural History Museum, while no supernatural stuff has happened, the Natural History Museum has its own weird, sordid history. In 1833, basically, until like the late 1800s, the Natural History Museum was basically a shit show. In 1833, the annual report of the Natural History Museum stated that about 5,500 insects in the Sloan catalog, that were from the Sloan catalog, which was basically their main stay of their collection, none of them existed anymore. So basically, all of their insects that had existed in their collection were gone. Nobody knew where they went. No, nobody had any clue. And also their natural history department had no capability to conserve their specimens. The Treasury refused to entrust specimens collected at the government's expense. So basically, the government basically said, we're never going to give you any specimens because you have no capability to take care of them. Appointments of staff were usually given to gentleman favoritism, which wasn't atypical at the time, but basically weren't given to people who had any medical or natural history knowledge. In 1862, a nephew of a mistress of a trustee was appointed as an etymological assistant despite not knowing the difference between a butterfly and a moth. Something you kind of need to know. And so basically the place was a mess. There also were instances, they reported that there were high instances of mental illness among the staff. There were instances where people were just ripping off the labels on things and then taking specimens out in gales, and specimens were just blowing away in the wind, never to be recovered. I mean, this place was an utter disaster. And it wasn't until about the 1870s, 1880s where things were actually gotten under control and it became a place where it was actually reputable to go. And obviously this takes place in the 1890s, so it was a place where Vanessa actually could go and it would be reputable. But it's an interesting little tidbit of history to know that this place actually used to be really, really shady and an utter disaster. When I was doing research on it, I just found it to be an utter comedy piece. And something that Drunk History would love to do if Drunk History did non-American stuff. As far as I can tell, Dr. Sweet is purely a creation of the show. So Vanessa goes to the Natural History Museum and is looking at all the taxidermy and meets Dr. Sweet. And Dr. Sweet is an utter delight. I love him. So he basically talks about the arachnids. He talks about the scorpions with her and basically notices her, despite the fact that she isn't in any state to be seen. Every other man that she has ever talked to, who's ever noticed her, she has been in a state to be seen. Dorian, Ethan, she has been dressed to be seen. And I think that's something that's very interesting to note. I think something that's also very interesting to note is that he forgets her name. He is so enamored with his own work and talking about his own work that he forgets her name. And it utterly charms her. He loves taxidermy. He loves all the things she does. And I love it. And I love him. Almost too much. It makes me very suspicious of him because he's almost too perfect. It either means he's going to die a horrible death or he's too perfect, meaning that he's not who he seems. Could he be Dracula? Who knows? But I don't necessarily trust him because nothing is what it seems on this show. He may have a dark secret, or he may be a really nice guy, which doesn't mean really good things for him. I have no idea with him, which is really, really great. I really, really like Ethan and Vanessa, but I immediately love Dr. Sweet, and I could really, really get behind Vanessa and Dr. Sweet, which is great. I think Vanessa, more than anything, I am fully supportive of Vanessa and Happiness, and I love them, but who knows about Dr. Sweet? I love that line where he talks about the unloved ones and the unvisited ones, and it's a beautiful line, but it's almost too on the nose. So I don't trust him, and we'll have to see. He just seems too perfect, but we will have to find out. So it does bring her to go cleaning. She starts cleaning, starts taking care of things, starts cleaning out things. We saw her writing to Sir Malcolm, and she seems to be in a better mood, seems to be dragging herself out of the darkness that she was in. And she speaks a Tennyson poem as she's looking out into the night. It is the Tennyson poem called Maud. It is a 3-part poem, and it is a comedy. And this is the 3rd part. Maud is the 3rd part, I think, if I remember correctly. Or it might be the 2nd. I think it's Princess, Maud, or In Memorandum, or In Memorandum, Maud. I should look it up. And if I am incorrect, I think Maud is the 3rd part. If I'm incorrect, I will put it in the annotations up here. But that's not the part. That's not my point. So she speaks the poem, and it's really, really beautiful and really goes with the theme of the episode. But what I think is really interesting is that what she's speaking is at the end of the stanza. What comes before the stanza, I think, actually is even more, that actually fits in a lot with what the theme of the episode is as well. And I'm going to read it to you guys. I'm actually not real great at poetry. I was a novel person, not poems, so bear with me. But it goes, my own's heart, my own a stone, farewell. It is but for a little space I go, and ye meanwhile, far over moor and fell, beat to the noiseless music of the night. Has our whole earth gone nearer to the glow of your soft splendors that you look so bright? I have climbed nearer out of lonely hell. And then it goes into her part. And I think that really goes into, again, the theme of the episode, especially the I have climbed nearer out of lonely hell. She had climbed out of lonely hell and thought she had found Ethan and thought she had found someone that she could spend her life with. And then he up and ditches her. And here she is realizing that there is life after that, and she can find something better. Something that's really important to know about Maud and what Maud is about. It's about obsession and instability, and about how love can trap and bind, and that it actually can be a myth, and that it's not necessarily a really positive thing. And I think, again, that really goes with the theme of the episode. It may not be something that goes with the entire theme of this season, but it goes with what we've been talking about this entire episode. And I think it's a really thematic piece. So, we end on that really high note with Vanessa, and we go into Reinfeld. And again, I'm going to tack Reinfeld onto Vanessa's storyline because it really goes into Reinfeld ties in with Vanessa. So Dr. Seward's secretary, Reinfeld, takes money and goes and finds a hooker, but Dracula finds him as well. So Reinfeld becomes a lackey of Dracula. That also happens in the book. But in the book, Reinfeld is a patient at the insane asylum of Dr. Seward's. And through Reinfeld, we find out a lot about how vampirism works in Dracula. We find out about how they have familiars with insects and birds and animals and things like that, how they drink the blood, and how they are able to communicate with Dracula. It's also really interesting to note that he does have a conscience. He doesn't feel really good about what he does and things like that. And we find out a lot of how Reinfeld feels and how Dr. Seward feels through Dr. Seward's notes. And Dr. Seward ends up not being able to handle Reinfeld very well, and he brings in Van Helsing, who is Reinfeld's friend. Obviously, we can't bring in Van Helsing, because Van Helsing died on season 1. It's going to be really interesting to see. So, I assume that Reinfeld is probably going to start being treated, maybe, by Seward. We do know that he's going to be very close and be watching Vanessa this entire time. And that's the connection that exists between all three of them in the book. It's going to be different, obviously. They always do a different twist on it on the show. But I wanted to give you guys a background on how it exists within the actual book so that you guys can kind of watch for parallels while you're watching the show. So let's move on to Victor and Dr. Jekyll. So, to note before we start talking about Frankenstein, if you didn't know in the book, so we have Lily, and Lily's been created, and Lily is basically strong and can't be killed. Interestingly enough, Frankenstein in the book has this vision that if he creates Lily, he may be creating a race of creatures that could destroy mankind, and destroys Lily before she's fully created. He started creating her, realizes that he may be creating a race that could destroy mankind, and stops creating her, destroys her body, pisses off John Clare, or Frankenstein's monster, because he doesn't really have the John Clare name. Didn't do that this time, did he? And came to fruition. So we have the Lily situation, who is not in this episode, and neither is Dorian, as a note. So obviously, we see Jekyll come and meet Victor. Jekyll and Victor were friends in high school, and college, and university. And, which is not, obviously this is a connection that's been made for the show, which I think is amazing, because they both could have gone to the same college. I think it's really great. As a note, both of them are much older in the books. I like that they've aged them down. But basically, Victor needs help killing Lily, and then decides that maybe I don't need to kill Lily. I need to bring her into the fold, which I really hope Lily deals with Victor. I love Frankenstein a great deal in this show. I feel kind of bad for him with his whole morphine addiction and all of this. But there are some really creepy and nasty overtones with his whole, I just need to have her become herself, and there's some real controlling women undertones that kind of gross me out with him when he talks about Lily, because he acts like Lily's his property, and Lily is her own fully realized creature at this point, and she doesn't want you. She's crazy and evil and terrifying, and no amount of drugs or whatever you're going to do to her is going to make her want you. And I hope she bites Jekyll and Victor in the ass. So that's what's going on with Victor. So let's move over to Jekyll. So I think it's really interesting that they've given Jekyll this, made him Indian. So, and when I mean Indian, I mean from India, I think, is, if I'm correct. He may be a Pakistani. I apologize if I'm getting his nationality wrong. But he, in the books, Dr. Jekyll actually has a lot of friends. That's something that they note in the book, is that Dr. Jekyll has a lot of friends, and obviously Mr. Hyde takes care of that. In the show, Dr. Jekyll does not have a lot of friends. Victor seems to be his only friend, and a lot of that has to come from the fact that he is an immigrant, his family are immigrants, and that isn't looked on overly kindly in England at the time. So it's going to be really, really interesting how they handle that. I'm really, really curious. They've made him a chemist, and that makes sense. And the way that they're going to be dealing with his inner anger and things like that is going to be really, really curious. We haven't seen a lot of how they're going to be handling that, but I just want to give you, again, a background on a little bit of Jekyll and how they've already started changing him as things are going on. Let's move on to New Mexico. As a note, of all of the characters that we've seen so far, almost all of them have had movies made about them, but they all have originated from books. The Wolfman, which Ethan Chandler comes from, is not originally from a book. Now, there are lots of books about werewolves, but the Wolfman, where the last name Talbot comes from, which Ethan is based on, is not originally a book. It is based on the 1941 movie, The Wolfman, which was a Universal movie. And there is no book that it's based on. It is originally a movie. So that's really curious to know. And for the most part, the storyline they're going with him is almost purely original, besides the fact that he is a werewolf and his last name is Talbot. I have a feeling they're going to go a little Wendigo with him, due to the fact that they're going Native American. It's going to be really curious. I'm really, really interested. So we see him on a train in the New Mexico territories with the Pinkerton boys and the British guys. And his dad has hired some outlaws to take him in to his dad. We also see my favorite witch is following Ethan. That's going to be interesting. And my favorite witch, of course, is named Hecate. Hecate has a thing for Ethan, the Hound of God. She really, really wants this Hound of God bad to be working for the devil. And she really wants Ethan herself. That's probably going to be something that Ethan's going to be tempted with a great deal. I'm really, really curious to see how they're going to develop Hecate. I like to hate her a lot. She was one of the more developed characters last season, despite not having a lot of screen time. So it's going to be really, really curious to see what they do with her. I think she's going to be an interesting antagonist for that storyline and going forward. We didn't get to see a lot of her because she got left on the train with the two British men. I will put their names up here because I have forgotten them. But so far, Ethan has been grabbed by his dad's outlaw men, and he is being dragged away. They say they're taking him to him. He says, yeah, right. If there's a full moon, I don't think it's going to happen. Ethan looks miserable, but we haven't spent a lot of time with him. I think that they really just wanted to give us a little update on Ethan and show us the New Mexico territories. So let's move on to Mount S3E1 Malcolm and Zanzibar. So S3E1 Malcolm is in Zanzibar. He's buried Simbene. He seems really upset. Obviously, he's writing Vanessa. From what we hear from Vanessa's letters, she's been lying to him and basically telling him that everything's okay, so he doesn't really understand that Vanessa's an utter mess. This comes into play a little bit later, So he's buried Simbene. He says that basically the Germans and the Belgians are enslaving the Africans in everything but name, and he's really, really disenchanted with Africa in general. No shit, Malcolm, but you kind of helped start it. I think he's really coming to realize that he's been kind of a shit guy. He doesn't know where he wants to go. He gives some money to a beggar woman and gets ambushed by people who want more of his money, and he gets saved by a Native American man. And the Native American man proceeds to scalp one of them and says, "Old habits die hard." Something I need to note here as history. Later on in the episode, the man says he's an Apache. Historically, Apaches did not scalp their victims. What happened was that in the Mexico territories, Mexico actually offered a certain amount of coin for every Apache scalp when the whole let's kill all the Native Americans were going on. And said, we'll give you 100 coins, 100 gold coins, $100. I think it was around there. It was 100 something for every Apache scalp you give us. From there, the Apaches retaliated and started scalping in turn. Before that, the Apaches did not scalp their victims. They only started doing it in retaliation of what the Mexicans were doing to them. So saying old habits die hard is actually pretty disingenuous of the Apaches. So I'm not quite sure why he would say that. Considering how old he is, it wouldn't be an old habit at the time. I will look at the date, but that sounds really disingenuous to me. And considering where we're going to be going with the Native American stories, it makes me really nervous because Native Americans are not always portrayed on screen very, very well, and their history isn't always portrayed well, and I'm really hoping it's done well in this show, because so far they've done very well with the cultures, and I thought that the Native American stuff that Ethan has talked about has been done well, and I don't want them to screw this up. I'm trusting them to do well with it. This makes me really, really nervous. There were Native American cultures that did scalp, but the Apaches did not. until after what the Mexicans did. So I'm a little nervous. It's a minor thing right now, but hopefully more things like this don't happen. But basically, this guy's been following Ethan since London. He tried to grab Ethan in London, but missed him. So he's been following followed Sir Malcolm here. And basically said that he needs to go save Ethan. He basically helped raise Ethan. And Ethan's like, or not raise Ethan, excuse me, but says that Ethan's like a son to him. And Sir Malcolm is also like a father to Ethan. And that Sir Malcolm can't die until he helps kill all the, fight the demons of earth and sky. And he said his name, and I'm not going to try to pronounce it. It's going to be right here. Ta-da! And Sir Malcolm's like, yeah, let's go save Ethan. Let's go save our son. That's great. I'm glad that Sir Malcolm is going to go save his son. But Vanessa still might need your help. I'm really confused. I get it. But Vanessa has no one. She has Lyle, and she has drug addict Victor. You've known Ethan for like less than a year. You've known Vanessa almost her entire life. You consider her a daughter now. And if you really think that the fear is over when this guy is telling you that, the demons of earth and hell still exist, and you were told repeatedly that there still is the devil on earth, do you really think Vanessa's safe? If you really think Vanessa's safe, fine, leave your daughter. It bothers me a little bit that that Sir Malcolm's abandoning Vanessa, but that's not atypical of him. The men on this show don't always make the best choices. I'm not surprised that he's making this choice now, to be honest. I love this show, but the men don't always make the best choices. But that's okay. I think that they make human choices, which I think is very, very good. And I love it for that. And I think the choices they make are human and honest and true to themselves, even if they aren't the smartest. So let's move on to our last location, and that is Antarctica. So we're with John Clare, or Frankenstein's monster. So he is stuck on the boat that he went to Antarctica with, and everything's frozen, people are dying, there are dead bodies around, and it's just a mess. Everyone is dying, and they're all trying to decide if they should eat people, and there's this whole moral quandary, blah, 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 blah. The thing is, I think it's really interesting that they're having this moral quandary. They wouldn't know it at the time, but what's really, really interesting is that the Catholic Church has actually repeatedly given forgiveness to people who have eaten human flesh to survive in survival situations like this. Not when they killed people to eat. You can't kill somebody and then eat their flesh and ask for forgiveness. But if there's a dead body sitting around and you eat its human flesh, the church has given forgiveness repeatedly because they consider it almost like eating the body of Christ. Because that's how you survive, and they want you to survive. And you can get forgiveness for that. So, considering it a moral quandary, it's very interesting. I get it, and they think that it's, being manly or whatever, and dying as a man and not an animal. But you know what? Surviving is an important human endeavor, and maybe they should do it. But the really interesting thing to note here is that John sits there and starts singing to the young child and starts remembering who he used to be. I don't someone can correct me if they remember it, but if I remember correctly in the book, because I haven't read the book in a while, the monster does not have any recollection of who he used to be. And the song that he's actually singing is a song called All Through the Night, or I'm going to pronounce this wrong, S3E1. It's a Welsh song. They think it was first recorded in 1784, and its earliest English recording was around 1862. And so that fits in right in the timeline. It's one of my favorite songs, and it would fit right in with around where John Clare would have been. And John Clare obviously freaks out over the fact that he can start remembering things, kills the kid in typical John Clare fashion, because gotta kill the kid because he's not going to survive, so he's going to be giving kid mercy. I guess it's mercy. I didn't feel that upset at him. When he gets upset, he makes really rash and bad decisions. But the kid was going to die anyway, so it's not something that I'm going to get overly upset about. But basically, the main point to make here is that he's going back to London to try to figure out who he is, I think. Interesting to note in the book, things are all over the place with John Clare when it comes to the book. Like the book, he's very articulate, and they're following the book a lot more when it comes to his personality. But right now, we're kind of all over the place. In the book, Antarctica is the last place that we see Frankenstein's monster. He basically, I'm not going to give away too much, but basically, in Antarctica, some things happen, and Frankenstein's monster is like, bye you guys, I'm never going to be seen again, and just fucks off into the Antarctic wilderness, never to be seen again. And that's where the book ends. Frankenstein's monster walks off, never to be seen. That obviously isn't going to happen. He is going to walk through Antarctica back to London. Don't know how long that's going to take. I assume he's going to find a boat or something. But so we're kind of bouncing all around Frankenstein's book for now. We're not really following the plot line on that at all, which is fine. But so basically that's the end of his story in Antarctica. So I think we just touched on Antarctica to get that little thing, and I don't think we're ever going to go back. But I think that's all we needed to really know about Antarctica. But it's really interesting that he's starting to get his memories back. I think it took him a lot longer than it took anybody else, due to the fact that he was the first. It's going to be interesting to find out what he does with that knowledge. Is he going to go after Victor? Is he going to go start searching for his family? Is he going to try to find his kid? What's going to happen when he finds his kid? If he finds his family? Are they going to accept him? Are they going to reject him? If they reject him, is he going to kill them? There are a lot of questions to be had here. Yeah. So going forward, my predictions for this season. I'm going to do this probably just for this episode, maybe a little bit going forward. Again, Ethan's storyline, I'm not quite sure where they're going with it. I'm really expecting that he may be a Wendigo. You can look it up yourself, but they basically, if you end up eating human flesh, you become something akin to a werewolf. You need to eat human flesh more and more, and they don't become a werewolf, but it's all about craving more and more and more, and all about insatiable desires and insatiable cravings. And then there's the Skinwalker tales, but Skinwalkers are a whole different thing, and they might mix the Skinwalkers with the Wendigos. It'll be interesting. Vanessa's storyline, I think, is going to follow a lot more with the Dracula storyline. Dracula, again, if you guys have forgotten, they recapped it a little bit in the earlier thing, but again, the devil broke into two pieces. Lucifer ruled over hell, and Dracula rules over earth. So I think we're going to cover that a lot more. It's going to be interesting to find out who Dracula is. Because again, Dracula should be a really hottie. So is he going to be someone we haven't seen yet? Is he going to be someone we have seen? And again, we have not seen Lily and Dorian. And I am really excited for their storyline. I initially wasn't really excited about Lily last season. And this season, I am so excited to see her and Dorian just become these people to be reckoned with. Like, we need some more villains on this show, and they are just going to be destructive, I think, and just amazing. I just want to watch them just chew scenery. I'm really, really excited about it, especially now that Dorian is kind of becoming more the Dorian that we know from the books. And I will cover... Lily is someone who's going to be completely off book. She's not going to be like anything we've seen. So I really won't talk about her in any book comparative. I will talk more about Dorian when we get to him, probably next episode, about him and his book, so you guys can have a little bit of fun with that. And I will talk more about Jekyll and his book when we start getting more into the Hyde section. I'm really, really interested to see what they do with him. But I hope you guys enjoy this. If you guys want to know, if you guys didn't like certain things, if I'm talking too much, if you guys want to hear more about the history of London, if you want to know more about some... If there's other things you want to hear about, if you want to know more about book history, if you want to know more about the history of London at this time, let me know in the comments. I really want to hear from you guys. Just let me know. I'm really, really passionate about this, as you guys can tell. So I just want your feedback. So just let me know. And again, this is Lindsay with When Nerds Attack, and this is Dreadfully